right, so welcome to the Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast, and today I have a very special guest. I would imagine most of my listeners would recognize the name, but just in case they don't, it's Lon Milo DuQuette. And so can you introduce yourself and, a little bit about your background and how you initially got into Thelema?
My name is Lon Milo DuQuette, and I guess I'm a writer because I don't know what else I might do to make an honest living otherwise. And I write about, I'm an old guy, I'm an old hippie. Just turned 73 in July, and I write about subjects concerning sort of the Western esoteric traditions, especially ceremonial magic and several varieties of ceremonial magic in particular. And the Hermetic Kabbalah. I don't pretend to be a Orthodox Hebrew scholar Kabbalah kind of guy, but Kabbalistic techniques and Kabbalistic thought is a big part of the Western Hermetic tradition. So I'm a Hermetic Kabbalist. I write about that too, and I'm a singer-songwriter, and just an all-around bum, actually.
I like that explanation. An all-around bum. We're gonna Google your name, Lon Milo DuQuette, an all-around bum.
So, but a well-rounded one.
A balanced out one, yeah. Okay, very good, very good. I'm curious because you talked a little bit about, you are very involved with writing in the Western esoteric tradition. Is there anything in particular that made Thelema click for you? Was there a moment where you're like, okay, I'm all in here, or where sort of you really feel like, this was your calling or your path?
Well, mostly the personality of its founder, Aleister Crowley. Once I got past the horrible, hideous reputation of the man, and which he cultivated carefully during his lifetime, I just totally resonated with his brilliance and his sense of humor. I mentioned that, my wife and I are old hippies. I really mean that. We tuned in, turned on, and dropped out around 1966, 67. And, but we did it sort of toward the deep end of the spiritual end of it, the mystical end of it, and we took it pretty seriously. And I was a big fan of sort of the counterculture heroes, Timothy Leary and Alan Watts and Dr. Alpert, who later became Ram Dass, and all of these people had an appeal to the young and rebellious people such as myself. And prior to getting deep into psychedelic mysticism, I was very active in the anti-war movement and anti-Vietnam War movement, and the early days of the civil rights efforts. So I was used to being a rebel, and sort of a socially conscious sort of agnostic. I wasn't. I was spiritual at heart, but wasn't at all religious in the way that all my Methodist colleagues when I was growing up were.
Mm.
And Aleister Crowley seemed just like a hippie in 1900,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and so just the fact that he was so outrageous and audacious and so brilliant and so utterly funny that I was just attracted to him. And even the things that he talked about that I wasn't at the time particularly interested in, he gave them credibility. I said, well, gee, if Crowley is into pranayama and different kinds of meditative techniques, and then his ceremonial magic thing, there might be some credence to that too. So the Crowley stuff originally attracted me to it, and then there was just a series of absolute accidents whereby I came into contact with several old students of Aleister Crowley, people that lived with Aleister Crowley, old magician Thelemites. I'm talking specifically about Francis Israel Regardie, Grady McMurtry, both of whom actually stayed with Crowley. Regardie was his private secretary in the 20s, and McMurtry was with Crowley during World War II in England. And McMurtry's wife at the time was Phyllis Seckler, who was a student of Jane Wolfe, who was with Crowley at the famous or infamous Abbey of Thelema in Sicily in the 1920s. And I was just so incredibly lucky. I just literally fell from one accident to another to come in contact with these people, and in very short order become initiated by them. Not Regardie. Regardie didn't initiate me into anything really, except his wisdom. But I've just been lucky.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a pretty big synchronicity or coincidence, just to sort of be surrounded by all of these sort of figureheads or pioneers of Thelema, really. Well,
and I seemed so helpless and so clueless that they obviously they felt sorry for me and were patient with me. And when I said, "Gee, did he really eat 120 babies that year?" They were kind enough to be patient and say, "No, he didn't eat any babies." No, Lon, he didn't eat. You won't be asked to eat any babies, Lon.
That's pretty funny. That's interesting. Well, you've been involved, obviously, with Thelema for several decades now, and close with some of these early pioneers, I guess you would say. What would you describe? What is the goal of Thelema and its practices? And do you feel like Thelema can lead to illumination or produce, maybe like what other traditions might call enlightened spiritual masters or illuminated individuals?
Well, I'll answer the second part of it first. Yes. I think the personal practice of the principles of Thelema can definitely lead to ultimate awakening, but so can flower arranging, so can martial arts, so can yoga, and it's the same awakening. Okay, it's okay. When you wake up, it doesn't really, there isn't a special kind of thelemic wake up and a flower arranging wake up or a yoga wake up. Okay, it's the same wake up. So if you applied yourself with Thelema in the same way that other techniques or ways of thinking practices, then of course it can lead to that. But it truly all depends on the person. And if you don't resonate to Thelema, do something that you do resonate to. But Thelema itself it's Wikipedia has got probably the cleanest little one sentence definition of Thelema. And it calls it, although there are Thelemites who will argue with you, but there are Thelemites that will argue with you about anything. So don't worry about that.
That's true.
But it's an occult spiritual philosophy. And if you look at it as if it was an organized way, like there's a whole body of different organizations and things associated with Thelema, then you could actually, if you wanted to, and if it doesn't bug you, you could call it a religious movement. And like I say, it was developed by Aleister Crowley back around the turn of the 20th century. And Crowley was already sort of an established poet and a writer, even before he started doing all of this stuff. And not only that, he was at least an amateur intelligence agent for British intelligence, who was recruited in his early 20s while he was going to Cambridge. And so, but in those days, spies were and agents were amateurs. It was very British. Okay, you're an amateur, you'll spy while you're on vacation in Capri,
Right. Right. That's definitely something that Crowley and John Dee both had in common, that they had this sort of like side roles, right? As a British spy, I guess you would say.
Yes. Please, I'm not a spy.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
No matter what you may read on the internet, okay, I am not a.
That's pretty funny. Well, I definitely agree that I always recommend people to read Crowley's writings, because you can read a lot of other writings of other, I guess you would say, spiritual masters, prophets, mystics, and some of them are funny, but Crowley's in particular are really funny. I'll catch myself reading, something that's very illuminating, enlightening, thought-provoking, and then the next sentence I'll be cracking up. So, and that's somewhat rare, I feel like, with some of the mystical material. It can be kind of heavy at times, and
right. Well, at times it's like Monty Python meets Saint Francis.
That's a good explanation. Yeah.
or Rumi or something like that. It's
most definitely.
The guy keeps you awake while trying to turn the lights on in you. So
yeah, good explanation. All right, cool. One book that I really recommend to a lot of people. I'm very interested in Enochian magic and have been working with it for a couple years. And of all things, actually, one of the big catalysts was you had a Zoom course a couple years back, which you can still find. It's still available on your pandemic workshop page, I believe. Is that the name of it? Right.
Yeah, I think there's 4 of them. It's a 4-part thing, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. It's 4 modules, basically 4 videos. And I had read a few books and stuff like that prior, but never actually, did any of the practice, right? I would read the books and got some of the original diaries and other modern texts like your Enochian vision magic, which is really good. But with that workshop, it's a very good introduction, has 4 modules, and not only do you get a little bit about the background story, but you also work with us to sort of scry some aethers, do some work with the Great Table. And so it's a very informative, but also practical. You actually dip your toes in doing something, right?
Yeah,
so,
we get into doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm kind of curious, like how is your like working with Enochian Vision Magic, the book, and also this this pandemic workshop series, how has your work with Enochian sort of evolved over time? Because in your previous books, it was there was less focus on sort of the original D material and way of doing things. And then over time, it seems like it sort of evolved and expanded. Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I joined the OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, in 1975. And just a couple years later, I was chartered a lodge of OTO in Newport Beach, and started initiating people into the order. And believe me, it's the blind leading the blind. Okay. And but I figured that even the fact that I was a novice myself as far as much of the technical magical training was concerned, but I was still a hardcore student. But early on, I decided, well, I'm just going to have a weekly magic class, and all of us here at the lodge, we will learn magic together. Okay, and that's still sort of my focus of my teaching. I only teach so I can learn stuff. Okay, and so we started learning the stuff that the beginning magicians always learn, like the Pentagram Ritual. Okay, so we did a couple weeks on the Pentagram Ritual, and then we did a couple weeks on the Greater Pentagram Ritual, and then we did a couple weeks on the Greater Invoking Pentagram, then a couple weeks on the Greater Banishing Ritual, then a couple weeks on the Hexagram Ritual. Oh, Jesus. And after a few months, I was running out of stuff that I knew more about than the people that I was teaching. So all I had on Enochian was a 2-volume set of Israel Regarde's version of the Golden Dawn, and a recently published edition of Gems of the Equinox, that Llewellyn, believe it or not, Llewellyn had that beautiful first edition of Gems of the Equinox. And I was thumbing through Gems of the Equinox to see something for next week's magic class. And I stumbled over this Liber Chanok and a few other essays from the Equinox about Enochian magic. And I thought, well, this looks sexy. I could probably do 3 weeks. I could probably do 3 weeks on this. And so I made the announcement at class. Well, next week, we're going to stop doing all these pentagram rituals, and we're going to learn together. We're going to learn some Enochian magic. Well, I went through Liber Hanok, and I may as well have been reading Klingon. Okay. I had no idea what this was, what all of this was about. And I thought Crowley was being purposefully obscure. What I didn't realize at the time is he was being brilliantly concise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He was being so concise that it didn't make any sense at first. It's like one of those things like when you already know it, it's simplicity itself.
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't already know it, you don't know how you ever will get to know it. It's sort of like the catch-22 of being in the Screen Actors Guild. You know,
Right.
You can't get a gig unless you're in the guild, and you can't get in the guild unless you got a gig.
Right.
But anyway, I started going through it and then comparing the notes with what was in Regarde's book, and at the time I was in regular communication with Regarde, who just lived up the road a piece in Studio City. Mm-hmm. And he was not very encouraging about Enochian magic, you know, because I wanted to have the class actually make the elemental tablets and things like that. And, mm-hmm. and I wanted to make the tablets in 3 dimensions with 4 sets of 156 truncated pyramids all painted and everything. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, don't do that. They're dangerous enough when they're flat. And I said, well, maybe they're dangerous when they're flat because they're all squished up in there. Maybe, you know. But anyway, mm-hmm. We started doing the Enochian study off of those 2 texts, which were the only thing available at the time. Every once in a while, I would get a few other things were starting to get published. Eventually, Laycock's Enochian Dictionary mm-hmm. Would come. But to make a hideously long story less hideously long, it finally got to the point of where we had together made sort of at least crude versions of the elemental tablets. And mm-hmm. we're starting to understand how those related, how those 4 Enochian elemental tablets of fire, water, air, and earth were truly the same thing as the 4 aces in the tarot, mm-hmm. and that the little sub-angles, the 4 little sections of each of those tablets were just the same thing that the 4 court cards in each of the tarot suits were. And so we were starting to see, you know, a universal application mm-hmm. of this. And it finally came time for next week. We're going to scry an angel off of the earth tablet. Okay, mm-hmm. We're going to stick our necks out. We're actually going to do magic next week, you know. Mm-hmm. And so next week rolled around, and one of our students bought that brand new Laycock Enochian dictionary. Now, I got to explain something. I got to digress. Enochian magic is meant to trigger an altered state of consciousness in the magician, mm-hmm. and but a very specific kind of frequency of consciousness. And there's multiple calls that are recited in the Enochian angelic language, and that sets up a resonance that's the equivalent of a very specific magical conscious expansion drug, okay, mm-hmm. that you sort of fall into a specific kind of reverie, and each one of those calls induces its own special kind of reverie. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it is one of the few systems where it's sort of how I guess growing up as a kid, you see those cartoons where somebody reads something like a wizard reads something off a book and it starts shape shifting reality. I would say Enochian's basically kind of the magic you thought of as a kid. Like you read something and instantly things start changing, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty high octane, I guess you would say, but yeah.
Yeah, it's high octane, and especially when you've been a hermetic magician for a few years, you really get used to the fact that magic doesn't work.
Yeah, until you find something like this where it's just when I was taking your the Zoom workshop, your Enochian Zoom workshop, and just listening to you read the call. This is before I had any of the temple furniture. Now I have, the Paleo ring and a lot of the temple furniture, but even just hearing the call without that stuff, I already felt my consciousness was expanding, almost like a mini psychedelic trip with visionary experiences.
You're right, and that language, okay, is very, very unique. There's lots of occult languages and angel language and stuff like that, and barbarous words of evocation, and anything will affect a change in consciousness, because everything does affect a change in our consciousness. But the Enochian language was of interest to real, live, scholarly, unmagical linguists, because it is almost impossible. Indeed, some linguists say it is impossible to create a wholly unique language from scratch.
Yeah.
And Enochian appears to be that. The way it was channeled, it was channeled letter by letter from grids, many pages of grids filled with letters, and in vision, one at a time, an angel would point to one of the pages and one of the lines and one of the columns and say, use that letter. And then they say, turn the page, 3 pages over. Okay, go to this line over here, this column over here, pick that line, letter by letter. And then it was read backwards.
Right.
And then it was translated. Okay,
Right.
they were given the translation audibly in an audible vision, if you can say that, audible vision. And as it turns out, there's 49 of these separate calls. Okay, and they're all translated, and it's proven to have its own consistent grammar and a form of syntax, and it can be translated just like Latin or French or Greek. And so it became of interest to scholars, linguist scholars. And Dr. Donald Laycock was one of these guys. He wasn't a magician. I don't even think he had any interest in magic. But he said, look, there were 2 guys in 1583 that within less than a 2-year period invented a language.
Yeah.
And they did it like this, and it's so full of double blinds and triple blinds and quadruple blinds that it blew his mind. And before he died, he said, I'm going to write a book about this. And he wrote a book, which was a complete Enochian dictionary. And one of our class members brought it to class. I told you I'd come around to this story. I'll get it back to our story. And on the first night, we timidly used the call to call forth a specific angel from the elemental tablet of Earth. It was the Mars Senior. His name was Ladrum. And we had a seer, or a person that volunteered to be the clairvoyant. Okay. And as soon as we did the calls, we had to do the call a couple times. He fell into, I guess we'd call it a trance. And he had a vision. And in the vision, during the vision, he fell into speaking another tongue spontaneously. We had our little tape recorder going. We were all blown away because it was magic that was really working, and for heaven's sake, we weren't prepared for something like that. But it was a roaring success. We were all very excited. It took over an hour of us playing the tape back and back and back, and using the Laycock's Enochian dictionary, and we translated what was said when David fell into the spontaneous speaking. And it said, Spirit of Earth, we were working off the Earth tablet, Spirit of Earth, first worshiper, welcome visit.
Interesting. Wow.
And
that's incredible.
Yeah, but anyway, and from then on, we did Enochian magic for the next 2 years. We did it the next 3 years, we did it 2 nights a week. So,
very interesting.
And it's during that period that we sort of very thoroughly and systematically went through Enochian magic as it was practiced by Aleister Crowley and the Golden Dawn. And because that was the only material we had to work with. But in the years between that late 1970s and then the early 90s, scholarship in Enochian magic became really good, and the original D material became more and more available and accessible. And I started to get fascinated by, okay, Crowley and the Golden Dawn, took just a tiny piece of this material from the original 1500s D material, and they made a wonderful, workable, breathtaking system out of it. But what was Dee and Kelly doing to get that system? And what I wanted to know about that. And so with the help of Clay Holden and the John Dee Project, and friends sent me microfiche from the British library in the Ashmolean material. And then, of course, there's the True and Faithful Relation and other material that allowed me to eavesdrop on what Dee and Kelly were doing to get that material. And for me, that was even more fascinating, because it's what Dee and Kelly did for 3 years to prepare themselves to be talking with these angels. And that's what I wanted to accomplish with Enochian vision magic. Right.
So most certainly, building the temple furniture and having the tools and what have you, and understanding, fundamentally what they are, I do definitely feel like that in some way sort of attunes your subtle body and mind to the system.
Yeah, the whole thing's a tune-up process. But, in a way, Kabbalah thought, Kabbalah techniques and ceremonial magic is ultimately just a tuning up process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because all we're doing this for is to wake up. We're doing this to become illuminated.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple fact is that escapes, at least attention early on, is that we're already awake.
Yeah.
Our machinery is in a sense, we've got all the parts. They're in pretty much all the right places, but we're just not awake to the fact that we're already there.
Right. It's the Buddha nature, as they say in the Eastern traditions. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we're adding anything on to, I'm not adding stuff on when I learn all of this stuff. I'm learning all of this stuff to tune myself up to the place where I know that I've already gotten rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Most definitely clearing out the perception and the lens, so to speak.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Also, to kind of move on to out of Enochian, because that Enochian itself is definitely a big rabbit hole. Like that's something, as you mentioned earlier, like, oh, maybe we can do this for 3 weeks. I mean, it can take a lifetime if you really want to get down and study, the original materials and work the system. It's a very, the practice of it isn't very complex, but just the nitty gritty, I guess you would say. There's just so much to go down and learn and explore. And even with like Liber Loga and stuff like that, there are people still working on aspects of the system and hashing it out. But very interesting. But one thing I really liked, I also checked out your HGA workshop, and that was a very beautiful presentation, very beautiful story. It reminded me almost like of a Rumi, like almost Rumi poetry to a degree. So I was wondering if you can share a little bit about that experience and, coming up with the HGA workshop.
Well, the HGA Holy Guardian Angel is a term, knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel as a level of consciousness, as a religious experience, if you will. The term originated with a book that fragments of the book were translated into English from French fragments of it by MacGregor Mathers in about 1888, and he published it in English as the Sacred Magick of Abermellon the Mage, which is a book written originally in German, I think, in the 1300s. And don't quote me on that. It might be the 1400s. I don't know. So, but Abraham the Jew was a real life historical character with credentials in the mystical courts of Europe and Central Europe. And he was sort of a superstar alchemist of his own. But he wrote this book about the Holy Guardian Angel and how a magician can just do anything if only he has his Holy Guardian Angel. And he tells a story. It's very romantic. It'd make a great movie.
There is a movie, actually. There is, oh man, I forgot the name. It's an Irish film. I think it's called A Dark Song. I can't recall. I'm not sure if you've seen it. But there is actually a movie, not exactly about the story, the initial story you're talking about, but it is working with the Abermellon operation.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Anyways, okay.
The thing is, and Abraham the Jew, of course, was a Kabbalist too, and he thought that was really so. Abraham the Jew was really familiar with the levels of consciousness that modern Kabbalists sort of associate with this diagram called the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are 10 levels, and they each represent truly levels of consciousness or levels of being awake. And the top one, number one, of course, would be Godhead itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that in a sense, if we just keep waking up, we eventually wake up to the fact that we've been everything all along,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So eventually you and me will both wake up to realize we've been each other all along,
Right. Right.
But he especially said in so many words that a person, a magician, isn't even a fully realized person yet until they've achieved this level of consciousness associated with that sixth sephira on the tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an experience that he termed gaining knowledge and conversation of your own holy guardian angel.
Mm.
It's as if the first major reflection, direct reflection of Godhead itself is in a smaller reflection in number 6. Number 1 reflects directly into number 6 on that tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you, as number 10 on the tree of life, aren't really you until you unite with that reflection up in number 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what you shoot for in magic.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless you are that perfect reflection, you don't know what the hell is in your best interest or not. Okay, you might be able to play with the dynamics of what makes magic work with intent and will and shit like that, but you don't know if you're doing it for your own best interests. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So until you know what's in your own best interest, all your magic is really hit and miss and potentially extremely dangerous. So your first act in magic is to get that holy guardian angel, or it should be, if you're wise. But of course, everybody jumps in the pool, but before they do that, but the thing is, any magic that you do prior to the knowledge of the conversation of the holy guardian angel should be magic that helps you make it easier for you to get the holy guardian angel. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it kind of ties in with what we were talking about earlier in the podcast, when I asked you sort of, does Thelema lead to awakening or enlightenment? And ultimately what you're saying is sort of the basically the initial practices that you do should be aimed at that itself, actually.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point on, it's not an allegory to say from that point on, then your angel is your guide.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Literally, from that point on, your angel is your guide. In other words, you're being informed from that level of consciousness.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, very.
So that should be the first goal of a magician. And for 40 years, that was I paid lip service to the fact that I got to get my holy guardian angel, and I did formal process of Liber Samach, which is Crowley's version of the Abermellon operation and all of that. But you know, I was getting old, and I don't think this is ever going to happen to me like this. I may never actually find out what's in my own best interest. I may never get my angel. You know, I don't think I've got my angel. I don't feel like I got my angel, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had an experience, not even trying to do anything in magical in particular. I had an experience in New York City where I was staying at a flat in Queens, and I was completely alone watching tango movies that a friend of mine said, "Hey, you might want to watch these tango things," because he was a tango enthusiast, and he went off into Manhattan that night to sweat. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 things all of a sudden started to click with me about the nature of love. And that and I was doing it while I was watching these two dancers together, and it's so romantic, and the music is, you know, gives you chills. And so I was being pumped into an altered state of consciousness. You can see what's going on here. And this give and take, this simultaneous pushing and pulling and positive and negative and receptive and projectiveness in their dance, all of a sudden kind of opened my eyes to the fact that love, just love, old-fashioned love as we feel it, is a two-way current. There's love that you give and love that you receive. Okay, and if you're the love that you're giving, just like the Beatles song, the love you make is equal to the love you take, you know, or something like that. But it's absolutely right. If your pure beam of love is going out, or projective, or like the positive side of spirit, you know, spirit is positive and negative, and active, passive. If your active love ray can be matched by your receptive love ray, in other words, if you can actually let go and allow yourself to be loved with the same intensity that you're loving, you've hit that golden feedback, like a microphone that's put too near a speaker. It screeches back because it keeps getting louder, and then it gets louder, and then the louder becomes louder, and the louder becomes louder. And that's just what happens, only it happens with a force that is love. And when that clicked in me, there's all sorts of super actual personal aspects to this, dimensions to this, that I don't need to get into with anybody else, literally, because you and everyone listening to this has their own personal set and vocabulary of personal issues that will trigger the same thing. Okay. But when that happened, that love feedback started to happen. Okay. And it was pure electricity, like I've had my fingers stuck in an electric outlet. And it kept getting louder and louder and louder, or stronger and stronger and stronger. So much so that I knew it was going to kill my body.
Mm.
and I didn't care. Okay.
Mm.
I from some part of my brain, I said, this is the way to go.
Yeah, just give in, let go.
But something in me said, no, yes, okay, you've already gone.
Mm.
Okay, you've already gone. This right now is an eternal moment. This moment never stops. So
Mm.
you may as well keep your body alive for a while, because this level never, ever stops.
Mm.
And I had to get up off the couch and take a walk. Okay. And it felt like electricity was coming out of my hands. I was afraid to move my hands around. I was afraid I was going to knock stuff off the wall. And I walked all over Queens, and Queens is so much fun to walk around. At least that neighborhood is in Jackson Heights.
Mhm.
And I came back to the house. It was probably after midnight, and my friend Kent hadn't come back from Manhattan yet, and it was only then did it dawn on me that this thing that I had kind of roughly in a containment chamber, this nuclear reaction that was going on in like a little, I had finally sort of captured it and put it in my chest somewhere, was my equivalent of my knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. Because it was only then that I figured, okay, this is what mine is like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd say it was transformative, but it was more transfigurous. it was a transfiguration. Okay. And then I started to understand all sorts of stuff. And I just fell in love with everything.
It's very beautifully said, and also very beautifully presented in your HDA workshop too. So I definitely recommend checking that out to the listeners. You presented it very beautifully now, but that goes into a little bit more depth, and there's more visual aids and what have you. So definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, just I think a lot of people sort of divide their magical practice or spiritual practice and their everyday open-eyed waking life, right? But with your story, it's sort of showing that every moment can be a magical moment, an illuminating moment too, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It already is.
It already is. Yeah, exactly. Okay. In general, because you've been, as I mentioned, you've been involved with Thelema for so many decades now, and you've seen, different trends come and go. One question I'm pretty curious about is what is your view on orders and lodges? I've never personally been a part of any order or lodge, but do you consider them to be important, in this current age? And what do you think? Like these days, there are a lot of things like study groups and online Zoom groups that people do, and what have you. Where do you see things going in general in regards to orders, lodges, online study groups? And just curious, kind of your take on that.
Well, there's no real substitute
Mm-hmm.
for an experience of a well-trained initiation team,
Mm-hmm.
putting you through a beautiful and artfully created temple initiation ceremony. Okay, there's just, but the luxury of having that happen is getting rarer and rarer and rarer.
Mm-hmm.
And the greatest brick and mortar mystery schools in the world in the last 2 years have almost ceased to function to their, not only their capacity, but even my Masonic lodge has scaled back so far, and truly, I can't predict the future, okay, but I don't think things will ever be the same. Of course, they won't be the same. They're never the same. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, but especially now. So I think it will be more and more important, because all your work is done. Even nobody projects initiation on you. I'm sorry, if it's helpful for you to think that a holy man or a holy person, just by gazing at you, is giving you some kind of darshan or magical blessing that you can't, that you otherwise can't get from anybody else, I believe you're mistaken. And no matter how tight your initiation ceremony is, and how cool and prepared your initiatory team is that's initiating you, you're initiating yourself. Everything is self-initiation. You only have yourself to initiate you, no matter how many people are showing up to help you through the psychodrama of your experience. Ultimately, you're doing it yourself. And all your magical practice, even if you do group workings and things like that, all your real magical practice that you do is solo. The best you can have for a group ritual is a group of people doing solo magic with each other.
Right.
So, keeping that in mind, the future of human beings advancing and evolving and unfolding themselves through magical practices and the initiatory techniques of the great lodges of antiquity and the present, I think that great work will continue. I don't think, though, it'll ever, again, in the foreseeable future, be the big social events that we've seen in the last, say, 200 years with Freemasonry, or the magical societies such as the Golden Dawn or the OTO. And more will be done remotely, just for people's health and safety, and the fact that the world is blowing away and burning down around us.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you mentioned, sort of when one door closes, another opens, and so it's been a good opportunity to check out like your pandemic workshops, and there are other online study groups and things going on. So it's there are other avenues to connect with other practitioners and get some insight, share some insights as well, right?
Right. And I'm a ham, okay? I confess. And every day since the pandemic, every day at 10 o'clock, I try to do a little live show of some kind on my Facebook page. I think I read through most, if not all, of my books,
Right.
15, 20 minutes at a time. Because I need people, okay? I need to interact with people. And if I have to do that with on the internet and on FaceTime and things like that, where people can leave comments and people can actually FaceTime me and everything else. I feel like I'm having a richer social experience than I would have had had the pandemic not hit us.
Most definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I think people, although, you know, your practice is solo, there is a human need, I suppose, right? A human need for connection and for sharing and giving and receiving, as you mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's definitely, you call them the morning reads or something. I do enjoy those when I get the chance to check them out on Facebook. So.
And they stay up forever. And some friend is kind enough to make a YouTube out of them instantly, and they're all on YouTubes too. So. Oh
yeah, that's right. Yeah, some guy did. I forgot the name of the channel, but they're all archived, like for each book, and yeah, on a YouTube channel, definitely. But if you want to check those out live, you can obviously find Lon Milo DuQuette on Facebook too, right? Where you can actually check them out and join the live feed and the chats and what have you.
Yep. That's the closest thing I've got to my daily blog, I guess, is Facebook.
So we won't be catching you on TikTok anytime soon, doing some dances and
I'll break a move. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Bust a move. I actually have a listener question here, which I thought was a pretty interesting one. I know regrets are in many sense unthelemic, but what is a regret that you have, either about something that you did or something that you didn't do? And how do Thelemites skate the line with regard to regret?
Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. You know, I regret about every other thought, every other behavior. Okay, if somebody thinks it's thelemic not to have regrets or not to apologize or you know, I'm sorry, screw that. No, I've got, of course, I've got lots of regrets over things that I, you know, may have done better or big blunders in my life, and because I'm just truly, I'm a klutz, and I'm extremely lazy, and I'll do all sorts of unworthy things to get out of doing an honest day's work, you know, and so no, I don't have a problem having regrets. All my problems are the things that are over the things that I'm regretting.
You're regretting your regrets.
yeah. So, but from a, and this may have something to do with the fact that I'm lazy and probably terribly unhealthily narcissistic. Even though I have regrets and I admit to my shortcomings, I forgive myself quite easily.
Oh, that's a good thing. Well, it sounds pretty healthy.
Yeah. Good. And so I figure if I don't forgive myself, nobody else is going to either. So I go ahead and I'll beat myself up over something, and I won't forget it. You know, it's not that I put it so far behind me that I don't cringe whenever I think of something that I should, you know, regret.
Oh, most definitely. I guess one thing I'm curious in that regard is, since Thelema itself, we kind of talked about, you have Enochian magic, you have tarot, you have Kabbalah. It's sort of it's almost like a university with all these separate master classes that you can go off and do a PhD in, I suppose, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious if you know, we only have one incarnation currently, I suppose, but if you could spend a lifetime in like one, if you could almost go back in time and say, hey, I'm going to spend 60 years in this, one of these sort of like offshoots, would there be any, if you go back and explore tarot for another 50 years or Enochian, would there be any like area that you kind of regret not diving deeper into?
Well, probably the more subtle Eastern meditative thing. I sort of wish that I could be more, especially since my experience in New York. I wish I was more Rumi-esque.
Okay.
I wish that, you know, I could be more Sufi-like.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's it. Everything else has serves to be a vocabulary where I can explain things to myself. But you know, I can see things in Kabbalistic terms, and I can see those illustrated and expressed in tarot, and I can see the Enochian thing as fractals of consciousness, and I can see the Enochian aethers, 30 Enochian aethers, as, you know, comparable to the, but that's all linear kind of stuff, and I'm glad I know about it, and I am who I am because I learned it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would really like to be able to, you know, just love myself across the abyss.
Okay. Sort of resting in that compassionate awareness.
Yeah, you know, because I have a sense, you know, when I have a sense of that, a glimpse of that, but I don't get it in textbooks or grimoires or anything. I get a glimpse of it in poetry and music.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One thing I'm curious is just, you know, talking to you and reading your books, you have such a great sense of humor. Were you always like this, or is this something you developed or you got from, you know, is it something in your family?
Well, my father was, you know, sort of a serious-minded Freemason geologist, and but my mother had a great sense of humor when she wasn't being otherwise terrifying. But I think it's probably just very simple psychology of I found it, I loved early television. We had the first television in our neighborhood in Lakewood, California. And I loved watching Jack Benny and Burns and Allen and Milton Berle and Sid Caesar and I Love Lucy. And so a lot of these people, Jack Benny especially, and Bob Hope, they all came out of vaudeville. And vaudeville was such an audience, intimate audience interaction kind of experience, and that the laughter thing meant love to me. And so when Jack Benny made the audience laugh, or when Groucho Marx made the audience laugh, I sensed that that holy guardian angel double current thing happening. And but of course it would be 60 years before, you know, I labeled it as such. But I associated my wit being able to trigger that response. And so early on, I became the class clown. And I think I had attention deficit disorder because I was a horrible student, but I literally could make everybody laugh. And just about as soon as I became so disruptive in class, they discovered that I could sing. And they said, okay, let's take him out of class a lot and put him in the musicals, you know. and so my class clownness early on, even in grade school, by the 6th grade, they were saying, get him out of class and put him in show business. So
that's pretty funny. Yeah. Well, it does your humor. I mean, it makes your writing and your presentations enjoyable for sure. And definitely, I'm sure it creates a lot more relatability for a lot of people as well, you know?
Well, the thing is, it's funny. Everything's funny, especially occultism, and occultists are funny.
Oh,
and I knew the morning I accidentally sat on my wand that I'd just taken 2 weeks to consecrate, and I broke it in two. I knew if I didn't think this was funny, that I didn't deserve to be a magician. So I became quite convinced that the best way to stay sane when working with an irrational spiritual art form was to see how funny everything was, as well as how serious everything was.
Oh, most definitely. Definitely. All right. Well, this has been a really great interview, and really enjoyed talking to you. But as we mentioned earlier, you have some great pandemic workshops up. And I know that recently you did put out one on invocation, I saw, and I believe a Jupiter talisman one, I think, popped up on Facebook as well. But yeah. Are there any plans for any future books or any future pandemic workshops coming up?
I just finished the invocation Zoom workshop. I've coming up in December. I've got I'm going back to China, but on the internet. I'm going online. I'm doing the 4 Enochian seminars live for Chinese students in December. And so I'm busy preparing that, because everything I say has to be translated as I'm saying it. So they're live workshops, you know, because the Enochian thing is experiential. So I'm working on that. The second edition, the new enlarged second edition of Homemade Magic, is in the can and being released probably after the first of the year from a new publisher, the magical the folks at Magical Omaha, the same people that are doing the tarot cards.
Oh, okay.
So I'm doing that, and yes, I've got another book in the works for my publisher Weiser, my old best publisher. But I'll be able to talk more about that in a little while.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I'm keeping extremely busy, and even throughout the trauma of this move to Sacramento.
Yeah, it sounds like Sounds like you lost some stuff or some stuff got damaged. It's very rare to hear somebody move and things go very smoothly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Fortunately, but yeah. All right. Well, where can people find you? We're talking a lot about your books, and where can people find your books and your pandemic workshops?
Well, they can find it on my Facebook page, Lon Milo
Okay.
DuQuette Facebook page. But I'm going to give you my email address,
Hmm.
because if you would like me to send you a link to order all of the or any or all of the pandemic workshops, I can just send those right to you,
Hmm.
uh, and uh, tell you how to do that and everything else. So my email address,
Hmm.
I'm going to give out my email address. I have no privacy. What the heck? It's Lon Milo, one word,
Hmm.
Lonmilo at gmail.com.
Hmm. Okay, very simple, very easy. And also on Facebook at Lonmilo DuQuette, right?
That's right.
All right, cool. Yeah, definitely recommend checking out his Facebook. And he does those the live reads, I'm pretty sure daily, so you can check those out as well. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. This has been really good and very interesting that you're very close to where I grew up now.
Oh,
You moved about, God, I don't know, by car just a few minutes away from where my mother currently lives. So welcome to my old neighborhood.
oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. And
Thank you very much.
enjoy all the good coffee at Temple Coffee and the
Yeah.
Cody Brothers and all my old stomping grounds,
All right. And there's McKinley Park right down the street here from me.
Oh yeah,
Boy,
it's
and
beautiful.
I love Land Park. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful.
Oh, those are both beautiful places. Sacramento definitely does have some amazing parks, and they do call it like the city of trees. There are trees everywhere, especially in your neighborhood as well. So yeah,
I
definitely,
love it.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming on, and until next time.
Okay, thanks for having me. Thanks for
Okay.
thinking of me.